I thought for our 50th episode, we could look back on some of our favorite episodes. Tonight, we're going to look back on some fun stories from guests we've interviewed in the past. We'll start with Lisa from Historical USA, talking about some very exciting and interesting family history that caught us off guard. After that, we'll look back on some World War II conversations we had with Sarah, the History Chick 1941. And last but certainly not least, we'll look back on some Civil War family history ties from JD of the History Underground. I hope you enjoy.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier my one of my biggest hobbies is genealogy.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So I love genealogy. I know a lot about my family history, and one of the things that I love to tell people is that my great-great-grandmother saw the shootout at the OK Corral.
What? How awesome!
Yes, and
is
she
that?
was like 12 or 13. Her father worked for the silver mine. So
Okay.
Tombstone is a big mining town, and it's a boom town. And so there was a silver mine there, and he was a silver miner working for the silver mines. And I mean, I think Tombstone's an awesome town.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Yeah.
so fun. They have kept that Western theme going up.
Yeah, we still need to go.
Yeah, we're going to do a walk with
forever.
history from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, go to the bird cage, go to the courthouse.
Mhm.
I mean, I've been there. It is a desert town.
Mhm.
But my grandmother, she was there in Tombstone when the OK Corral, when that shootout
gosh.
happened. And the shootout is quite funny because there is quite a build up to it. I mean, there is definitely hostilities happening in the town between the two groups, between the brothers and the Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. But the shootout lasts for like less than 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
And it's kind of, it wasn't like out in the street. It was kind of like a ways off in an alley.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go and watch the recreation of it or the reenactment
okay.
of it. And it's like, boom. Oh, wow. That's it.
Yeah.
But it's the history of the lead up. It's
The lead up.
the
It took a
drama
while.
of
Mhm.
the building up.
Yes,
to,
of this hostility.
to Wyatt Earp. And then the courthouse is really interesting too. There is a lot of history behind there. You can go there and find a lot of like ghost tours. You could take a lot of ghost tours there. Like the bird cage is haunted, is supposedly. And all throughout Arizona, you're going to find these like cowboy towns.
Yeah.
That they've kind of kept up a little bit.
So your grandma was in Tombstone. How long did she live in Tombstone then? How long was she there? And
So
your great
they were in
grandma,
Tombstone. She got married very young. She actually married at 14.
which was
And
probably
so
it was
she
typical of the time.
Yeah, she wasn't there for very long. Had a couple kids, but she moves to Yuma, Arizona.
Okay.
Or kind of outside near the Welton area, a little outside Yuma, Arizona. And that's where my dad's family lived for a very long time. My grandparents were there. So we would go to Yuma, and and you can go to, like, if you ever seen the movie 3:10 to Yuma?
I love that movie
really
so much.
Yeah.
Yes. I love
Okay, well,
it.
you
I was
can
gonna say
go
that, actually.
you can go to the fort. I mean, the Yuma prison is still there.
Yeah.
And so you can go to the fort there, and they have a graveyard and stuff, and you can kind of walk around and.
So much history, Lisa.
What do you remember learning about World War II when you were younger, and maybe something more that stands out to you now? Maybe your kind of favorite World War II history story or piece of that era.
So learning about it when I was young, it was very basic school learning about World War II. We really didn't learn anything about the Pacific Theater. It was mostly the European theater. We learned Hitler came to power. He invaded Poland. We got bombed by Pearl Harbor, and then we came into the war. And then towards the end, we learned about the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. So it really wasn't, when I was much, much younger, before I got into history, when we were learning about this, I didn't learn a lot about it. But learning about it as I especially got older and learning about how in-depth World War II was, it's crazy to me, because also you have all of these different operations. And in school, we learned that it was pretty much the United States and Britain who were in World War II. There was nobody else involved.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We were the victors. We were the only people that were in World War II. And so we thought that for a long time. And then realizing how many different countries and allies we had in World War II, that's just like mind blowing.
Russia, big one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah,
we were friends.
We were friends, but
we were allies.
Yeah, but the thing with that is, I think Russia kind of looked at whose side should I be on?
Yeah.
Who is going to get us farther?
Yeah.
Who's going to win the war?
Yeah.
And so that's who they sided with. So that's why they sided with us. They're like, Germany's going to lose. I'm going to side with the United States and just kind of go with their thing, because they were looking at the long picture and the future. Interesting things that I've learned that I think is just probably one of the most fascinating things is the deception tactics before D-Day. Yeah. The whole deception tactics, and that Hitler did think that we were going to invade Pas-de-Calais. Like, and even when the D-Day landings happened and he heard them happening, he still thought we were going to invade Pas-de-Calais. And that wasn't it at all. And which is why he kept the Panzer Division up where it was supposed to be. Yeah. And if he had sent in the Panzer Division when they requested it, the D-Day could have turned out much differently. Those deception tactics were just absolutely insane.
I love how you love that, Sarah. And I think you love the Ghost Army. You always talking about the balloons that they used and like the deception that they used. And I'm like, Sarah missed her calling in like Intel, because they still don't get me. They still do that today. Yeah. Governments still do that today. Armies still do that today. Believe me. And so it's very interesting that that's something that's very useful. And it's a tactic when you look at satellite pictures. Is that real, or are they just trying to deceive us? You're buying the balloons all the time of the tanks.
They were inflatable tanks, and the Ghost Army was made up of artists and engineers. They weren't made up of G.I. Joe combat soldiers, even though they went through basic training and had to learn combat and stuff, but they were artists and teachers and painters, and that's what made up the Ghost Army. And they just these deception tactics of creating that's what fake military encampments, motor pools. They had ships, and then the sound, the gigantic speakers that would do sound of soldiers' footsteps and radio chatter, and they created fake insignia and went to town and started getting all chummy with the town folk, so a spy was there, they'd be like, oh no, like this is one of Patton's armies, and all that stuff. It's just so crazy.
But I actually heard a very interesting story about England in World War II just the other day. A story about a toy maker during World War II who was asked to make kind of like a scale size model of the coast of like all the English coast in France and the various coasts by the British government, by the army, by the navy. And so this toy maker, he's making this kind of scale size model of the coast, and he assumed so that they could do their planning and this, that, and the other. And so this toy maker finishes it up whenever it is. It's late at night, but it's in a rush because everything back then they tried to do it now. So he had it in the back of his truck, driving up to the Portsmouth base. And there's a midshipman. So this is someone who's not even technically like a full-blown naval officer yet. So there's a midshipman. It's in the middle of the night. It's like midnight, who's kind of standing gate guard. And so they stop him there, and they're kind of looking. They're like, "What are you bringing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm bringing this scale size model or whatever like that of the coast." And they look in the back, this midshipman. So he's thinking, he's like, "Well, we don't need the whole coast. We just need Normandy." And then he realizes right then and there what he just said, because Normandy was in like 6 months. So he's like, "Oh no, I just gave away what's going to happen in 6 months."
No, I must lock you up for 6 months.
So that's exactly what they did.
Really? I didn't even hear the story.
That's exactly what they did. They were like, "Hey, bring your stuff on in." And that guy didn't leave the base for 6 months until after Normandy.
You've seen too much.
Apparently this is like a legit true story. I tried to look it up online earlier today and I couldn't find it. So maybe this is one of those like kind of urban legends that's been passed down in the Navy or in the military over there. But I believe it.
I believe it because I believe a midshipman would be that dumb.
Talk about a crazy story, right? About World War II. And to your point, into like all the deception and this, that, and the other, that stuff was like really tightly controlled because it was so important at the time.
And no one knew who the spies were.
Right.
The spies were so deeply embedded, right? Both sides really feel grounded in their cause, right? The Nazis feel very grounded in their cause. The British feel, and Americans feel, so the spies are deeply embedded, right? And so, you have to really be careful of who you're talking to.
So what's a bit of regional history that you think might fall into that category?
Like I said, I grew up in Missouri, and we've got Civil War history here, but it's different than the Civil War history like out where you all are on the East Coast.
Sure. Yeah.
Out on the East Coast, there's a lot of big, huge epic battles and formations that you typically think of whenever you watch Civil War movies. Out here, it was just a lot of bushwhacking and burning people's farms down and
contraband.
More spread out.
Oh man, it was I have an ancestor who has kind of a neat story. There's a highway, a state highway. It's probably about 30 miles from me, and off on the side of the road, there's a Confederate grave marker, and it says, "Here are the bodies of 3 unknown Confederate soldiers." Well, my great-great-great-grandma buried those men in that grave.
Wow.
And there's actually 2. The grave marker's wrong. There's actually 2 in there instead of 3. But the story is her husband was off to war. This whole area was filled with a bunch of Confederate guerrillas, and it was just bordering on anarchy around here. It's a dangerous place to be. But she overnight would run supplies through the lawns because women, they wouldn't suspect a woman.
There's a great article about Missouri women running
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
oh, really?
I'll have to say, I'll have to send it to you, JD. I read it in grad school, so I have it. I had to read it for school.
I would love to see that.
Yeah.
So my great-great-great-grandma would have been one of those women. So she was getting like quinine medicine and supplies and stuff like that.
Holy cow.
Smuggling them back and forth across the lines. Well, one day she came across these dead Confederate soldiers and knew that if these Confederate guerrillas came and found these dead Confederates, that they would likely come into the town and burn it down or hang some of the men or something like that. And they said she was a short woman, but real strong and spunky. And so she buried those men there at that grave. And
awesome. Did you do do an episode on that?
Not yet. I'm going to at some point.
Yeah. So was that kind of like that's like the perfect example of like regional folklore. Family history, right? That's like super local, super hyper relevant. So was that just kind of like a family story that was kind of just verbally passed down?
Yep. As one of my grandpa took me out there and showed me whenever I was really young.
How
we were
cool.
turkey hunting. And in Missouri, you have to stop hunting at 1:00. So after 1:00, we got done turkey hunting, and he said, let's run out here and I'm going to show you something. And I was 5 years old whenever he took me out there. And it was really funny. I hadn't been back. My grandpa passed away a couple years ago, but I wanted to show my kids. And I was able to take them right back to that spot. Like it had that much of an impression on me. So I hadn't been there in over 35 years, but was able to take them back.
That's so interesting too, that like the more, again, from the non-history buff guy here, right? The more I learn about history, and we either come across memorials or monuments, and Jen is educating me multiple times because she talks about it before we go, and then we have to record it, and then I'm editing. And so I actually learned a lot more history than I ever expected. But I learned about not just the famous battles, not just the big names that we all hear about, right? The generals and the Pickett's Charge and this, that, and the other, but also all the supporters and the women and the kids and the communities and what they did during these monumental times and these dangerous times. And like, I mean, your great-great-great-grandma was like a super badass.
She's burying guys in the middle of the night to protect her town because she knew that there would be retribution if they were found.
Yeah. Yep. So to me, that's the kind of stuff that until you really kind of get to kind of live in some of this this history stuff, or you watch some of the good videos that I'll say, well, the three of us make. I'll just throw that out there. I think we're working to get up to your level, JD. We're getting there. But
I think your stuff is great.
Thank you.
Thank you, JD.
If you get to watch, that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed. I have enjoyed about doing this history stuff is learning those little tidbits and seeing like, man, there's so many more key players in these large historical events and times and periods than we ever really realized, that a lot of people realize. And your family, right? You've got family that are point directly to that.
That's a great.
That's really
I'll
good.
find that article for you because you'll be surprised. Like, this mentions my grandma.
Oh man,
it was a great article.
Wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's kind of interesting as we've been sitting here talking. I didn't even think about this until just a little bit ago. But if you'll notice, whenever I'm talking about where I've learned a lot of my history and stuff like that, I haven't really mentioned anything about a classroom. A lot of it are people in my family or friends or things like that who took an interest, invested in me, and passed these stories down to me or took me to places that would help spark my interest. So yeah, there's definitely a place for classroom learning and everything like that. And I think that's important. But where the biggest part of my learning has taken place has been outside of a classroom.
Thank you for listening to the Talk with History podcast. And please reach out to us at our website, talkwithhistory.com, especially for this 50th episode. Thank you so much for joining us. If you know someone else that might enjoy this podcast, please share it with them, especially if you think today's episode can interest a friend. Shoot them a text and tell them to look up the Talk with History podcast because we rely on you, our community, to grow, and we appreciate you all every day. We'll talk to you next time.